Come on, big damage. Big damage. My God! 100 mil plus! Come on! Woo! Yo guys, what is up? Max, our Diablo 4 video, and today we're talking about Hurricrit Druid. Now, I believe this is the strongest Druid build in the game right now. I know I said I thought Tornado was the strongest. I put this build together and I cleared 25 plus tiers higher than I could at my max with Tornado. The build is hitting for over 100 million damage a tick on Hurricane when we get all of our buffs sorted. The damage is absurd. We are at over 70,000 HP when we're fully buffed up. We can tank hits from Pit 100 bosses. We're not even using a defensive skill in this build. We're not spamming Debilitating Roar. We just have so much health and so much defense, and it's such a comfortable build. However, it's really complicated, and in today's video, I want to break down all of the mechanics and how we're able to make Hurricane do so much damage. Hope you enjoy the guide. Let's get right into it. I do want to give a quick shout out before we get into everything to iBoilerUp. He is a fellow Druid writer over on Maxroll with me, and he is the one who came up with this build. I'm going to leave a link to his YouTube channel and Twitch channel. If you enjoy the build, make sure to go give him some love. I really do appreciate it. And with that, let's do this. So how do we make Hurricane do so much damage? Well, there's a lot of things going on, but the first thing you need to understand is that Hurricane is a skill that has a duration. Unlike something like Shred, where we click it, and if I'm buffing up a click of Shred, that click gets buffed, and then I lose those buffs. Hurricane is a duration-based skill, meaning that if I apply any buffs to it, those buffs will apply for the whole duration of Hurricane. And what we like to call that is snapshotting. So the whole goal of the build is to build up a ton of really powerful buffs that are only able to be used on one skill, but we're going to get all those powerful buffs for 20 plus seconds on Hurricane. Now, two of those big things is Provocation is one. When you remain in Werebear form for at least 16 seconds, your next non-defensive skill will overpower. This build plays as you're walking around just waving Maul at enemies. You're basically a basic attack build, hitting enemies with Maul. Maul does 0 damage for this build. However, it keeps us in Werebear form, and as soon as we're in Werebear form for 16 seconds, we place down Hurricane, and Hurricane for its entire duration is guaranteed overpowers. Note that my cooldown on Hurricane is currently 12 seconds, and it lasts 20 seconds, and Provocation is currently 16 seconds, meaning that we have Hurricane up 100% of the time. The only time that I'm like dropping Hurricane is like intentionally letting it drop so that I get the last ticks of its damage, which we'll explain in a second. But you're basically able to keep up this buff and this damage 100% of the time if you play it well. And what I mean by play it well is if you click any button that isn't Hurricane when you are at 16 stacks of Provocation, you're going to have to wait another 16 seconds to overpower Snapshot Hurricane. So the way that I play the build is I'm looking at the number of Provocation, and I'm typically waiting till around 14 to 15, and I just let go of my controller. I just wait for it to tick up to 16 to be in Werebear form, because if we click any skills when Provocation is at 16, we will lose our guaranteed overpowered Snapshot for Hurricane, and if you do that, Hurricane will be hitting for like 2,000% less damage. So really important to make sure you're clicking Hurricane at the peak of Provocation, aka 16 stacks. The next big snapshot with this build is with Clarity. Clarity reads, after casting a companion skill, your next core or wrath skill's damage and crit strike chance are increased by 15% up to 45%. This also snapshots for the entire duration of Hurricane. So after you click Hurricane, because you don't want to be clicking skills when Provocation is about to be up. After you click Hurricane and you go into your Overpower, you're going to click your Wolves, you're going to click your Poison Creeper, and you're going to click your Ravens. Doesn't matter if you click them on enemies or not. You just want to make sure that you get 3 stacks of Clarity. Clarity lasts until you use a Core or Wrath skill. So this will only empower Hurricane. You can never like use it up on Maul. You only need to click these skills once every 16 seconds. So that's pretty chill there. And then you're going to be getting the Clarity Snapshot. So these Clarity and Provocation are our two first big ways of empowering Hurricane. Our next big way of empowering Hurricane is with Hurricane Duration. All of these buffs last as long as Hurricane lasts, right? So if we can have Hurricane up for longer, we're going to get those buffs for longer. But Hurricane also has the Tempest affix that's going to give it 36% increased damage per second that it's active. So currently, I'm at 20 seconds. 20 seconds times 36 is 720. We have a 720 damage multiplier to Hurricane, which, by the way, is going to be basically guaranteed critting. We can reach crit cap on this build. It's going to be guaranteed overpowering. It's got a 720% damage multiplier. And then to pair with that, we've got the Changeling Debt, which gives us the 55% damage multiplier whenever we're hitting a poisoned enemy as a werebear, which is why we're going to be clicking Maul the whole time. We are staying in bear form, but our Hurricane's going to be doing the damage. So we get a 55% damage multiplier there. We get a 135% damage multiplier from Shepherds, which now this season is new to work with Wrath skills. So Hurricane gets another 135% damage multiplier from that. And we're also using the Loop of the Unsatiated. This is a little weird sounding. After killing an enemy with Shred, we gain 20 Spirit. You can ignore that. Your werewolf skills deal 25% increased damage when cast above 50 Spirit. We are using a Tempest Roar, which makes Hurricane a werewolf skill, so we're not spending Spirit with anything on this build. We have no Spirit spender, so every time you cast Hurricane, you get another 25% damage multiplier. All of these things combined, when you do it right, when you click your 3 companion skills, you maul around so that you're getting full provocation all the way up, and then you click Hurricane, and then you do a well-timed Petrify at the end of Hurricane. Petrify is 7 seconds, so we want to click, for me, I want to click Petrify at 13 stacks or 13 seconds into Hurricane. I'm going to be getting a massive crit multiplier on a guaranteed crit skill for the last seconds of it, and this is how we're ramping up Hurricane to deal 100 million damage. Now that we've gone over the core mechanics, let's get into the gear specifics. I'm also going to show my stats real quick. So right now, just sitting in town, unbuffed, no potions, we are at 49,000 HP. We are using Ursine Strength, so whenever we actually click Maul, and whenever I get into combat, I get up to about 60,000 HP. And with potions and incense, we get to 72,000 HP, which is really comfy. But Tempest Roar is not required for this build, but it is the best in slot. It allows us to use things like the Unsatiated. It allows us our Hurricane to constantly poison enemies to get in Venom. So Tempest Roar is really important for this build, but you can technically run it without it. Next up on our chest piece, if you're just looking for a lot of survivability here, I've got Willpower, Max Life, Armor, Max Life, and a chance to freeze. And then we're using the aspect of, this is the new aspect, Fevered Mauling. Whenever you hit at least one enemy with Maul, increase your attack speed, and you gain damage reduction. Now, damage reduction is so important on this build, and it's so important in the pit because of an interesting mechanic that has to happen with the new boss. I made a little drawing. It's really bad, but here is the pit boss. This is the Shadow Pit boss. He's got a big hammer. This is you. You're the druid. You cannot actually attack this boss, right? This boss cannot be targeted. You can't poison it. You can't make it vulnerable. You can't get damage reduction from close because it's not targetable. You can't poison, can't vulnerable. So the only way of damage reduction that works against this, the like shadow boss in the pit, is just raw damage reduction, non-conditional damage reduction, which this build stacks up a ton of. And that's why we're able to tank so many of the hits of the shadow boss, is we're going to be stacking up to 20% damage reduction on here. We'll get even more damage reduction later on. But I noticed that even when I had less health or like around the same health as Hurricane, because I had so many just general damage reduction multipliers, I was able to stay alive in the pit way easier. Next up, for your gloves, your god roll is max life, crit chance, and overpower damage. Remember, Max life is not only going to keep us really survivable on this build, but it also will increase your damage. Overpower, one of the things that scales with it, is your max life. So getting more max life gives us more overpowered damage. Max life is a stat that you're going to want on basically every single piece of gear that can roll it. And we're going to be using Changeling Dead there. Next up, pants. I got willpower, max life, armor, chance to immobilize, and some fire resistance. I'm just looking for extra resistance on one piece of gear. All res would work here as well. And then, once again, we've got another generic damage reduction. Whenever we basic attack with Maul, we're going to get 20% DR. So Maul is giving us 40% DR at like 100% uptime. It is crazy. Next up on your boots, the real big thing that you're looking for is plus ranks to Hurricane. I was able to get insanely lucky here and get a double crit on a greater affix for Hurricane, which amped up my damage a ton. Once I got this, I was originally seeing 30 mils on Hurricane, and as I upgraded my stuff, it just slowly got better and better and better. I was messaging Boiler. I was like, I'm at 60 mil, I'm at 80 mil. I just hit for 100 mil. This build scales really well. And getting plus ranks to Hurricane is quite nice on your boots. Doesn't need to be greater affix, doesn't need to crit, but it is really helpful for the build. And then because we don't have an unstoppable skill, we're going to be using the Metamorphosis aspect, which lets us have a source of unstoppable, which really helps with our survivability. Next up on your weapon, use a mace. A mace is going to give us that overpower damage. I said in Tornado it doesn't matter. It didn't really matter all that much, but because we're basically going to be overpowering on every hit, 100% overpower damage on your weapon for free is amazing. Next up, you're going to look for willpower, max life, and overpower damage is what I'd recommend. Willpower, remember, is multiplicative. Crit damage is still additive. It's like base multiplicative, but after that it's additive. So if you don't get willpower, I would go for crit damage. You could also go willpower, crit damage, overpower, any 4 combo of that: willpower, max life, overpower, and crit. Next up comes the real difficult part of this build, and I really want to stress this because the build does not function without it. You need a really high roll of Hurricane duration. On your weapon, there is no roll that is more important than a high roll of Hurricane duration. Ideally, it's a max roll. And ideally, you are critting on Hurricane duration. Will scale your damage up on this build more so than anything. I, unfortunately, haven't been able to hit a Hurricane duration, but I did hit damage to close. But Hurricane duration is the #1 most important thing for this. I went through about 9 weapons before I got one that had high Hurricane duration. Trust me, I know it sucks. I know it's expensive. If you want to run this build, please get something with really high Hurricane duration and try to greater affix it. But at least at minimum, get Hurricane duration as high as you can get it. We're obviously using Tempest and Overpower gems for more overpowered damage. Next up on your necklace, you're really just looking for Envenom. If you can get Envenom and crit chance, you're going to be sitting really pretty. You can get Envenom and ranks to like Quick Shift. Attack speed is absolutely useless on this build. It's just, this is my Tornado amulet. So I've got Envenom and Close and Resource Gen. You could look for even more movement speed is probably what I would go for on the like utility roll. So you're basically walking in this build the whole time. So even more movement speed feels really great. If I had another better amulet, I would be using that. Next up for your rings are a little bit interesting. So one of the really important rolls is to get a lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. The reason for that is vulnerable is a 20% damage multiplier against enemies, right? You're fighting these pit bosses at tier 100 for, I think we take about like 2 to 3 minutes to kill one. Because of that, our exploit glyph is not up all the time. If you have a high lucky hit chance for vulnerable, you just get these damage multipliers where you're getting 20% damage multiplier against an enemy. It is more important as a ring stat. You just need one. Just one. You don't need it on 2 rings. But just get it on 1 ring, and you're going to notice that your boss clear goes way up because you're just going to have way higher uptime on vulnerable, which is a bigger damage multiplier than anything else you could get on a ring slot. Next up, we're going crit chance and then either willpower or overpower. I don't have the best rings. This one's willpower, max life, crit chance. You're kind of looking for any combo of willpower, max life, crit damage, and overpower. And then you really want Hurricane cooldown reduction and damage to close. Remember that damage to close is multiplicative with the Thunderstruck node, which is also part of this build. which is crazy. Our Thunderstruck node is currently at 156 damage multiplier for Hurricane, which is fantastic. And that is the gear. For our Spirit Boons, we're rocking Wariness, reduced damage from elites, Iron Feather for more max life, and Avian Wrath for more crit damage. In the Wolf Boons, we went for Pack Leader. You could go for Calamity. Calamity extends the duration of your ultimate, which is really nice, so that we get more damage uptime on Petrify. However, I was noticing that I was dealing the most damage to bosses when they were stunned, which is when I hit the 100 mil. And if I'm proccing Pack Leader, I get 100% uptime on Clarity, and I also get to use my companion skills more often, and my companion skills all have like CC. And so I was noticing that when I was using my CC companion skills on enemies, I was getting the bosses to go into that stun phase faster. So I went with Pack Leader. You could absolutely rock with Calamity. They're both great options. And lastly, we got Masochistic. Masochistic is a must-have. It is quite literally the only way to heal on this build besides potions. We don't have any healing. That is kind of like one of the weak sides, one of the downsides of the build. You will have to use potions to heal. Fortunately, things don't hit us that hard, and we have a ton of health. And when this does proc, it's proccing for a lot of healing. For our skill tree, we're using Maul with Fierce Maul so that we can hit more enemies with Maul. This skill point isn't really important. We're basically just trying to get down because we don't really benefit from any of this stuff. So we're just trying to get further down in the tree. We're going 3 points Predatory Instinct for more crit chance, Iron Fur for more DR. We are not using a defensive skill. You can use Debilitating Roar with a Hunter Zenith. I just don't think this build needs it if you build max health properly on your gear. 2 points in Ancestral Fortitude. I am currently res kept on everything. We have 731% crit damage, over 2,000 overpower. I didn't need more resistances. If you do need more resistances, I don't know why that's so hard for me to say. You can put more points here. Next up, we are just trying to get our companion skills. We don't need to put points into them. We're grabbing Clarity, Ravens. Make sure you get Brutal Ravens so that we get more out of our Shepherd aspect. Hurricane, obviously, with Endless Tempest, which increases the duration and the damage. Provocation, Envenom, and Toxic Claws. This will allow our Hurricane to constantly poison enemies and then get that crit damage against them. Petrify to make us deal more damage. Defiance, so that we get more damage against elites. Natural Disaster, more damage against stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. That's why you saw that I had so many like immobilized rolls on my gear. And then we've got Resonance for a little bit extra damage boost. And then lastly, Quick Shift, Heightened Senses, and Natural Fortitude. And the best in slot for this build is Ursine Strength. We're going to get the 20% max life, 30% damage while healthy, and 30% increased overpower damage. For our Paragon board, we are prioritizing glyphs. We have 7 glyphs on this build. We don't have many legendary nodes, but we do have a lot of glyphs, and we're prioritizing survivability and max health, as well as a lot of damage. So in our first board, we've got Spirit. Spirit is going to give us our crit damage multiplier. Once again, we are going to be critting all the time with this build. Next up, we're moving to the Heightened Malice board. Heightened Malice would be a really great multiplier for us when we're mobbing, and I would like to grab this in an iteration of the board for more speed farming. The only issue is I can get to the boss in about 4 minutes in like a pit 100, but the boss takes me about equal amount of time, and so this doesn't help us with bossing, and so that's why Heightened Malice just really isn't as important, but for like speed farming, blasting, Heightened Malice would obviously be great. In this board, we're going Fang and Claw. It's going to give us a damage multiplier while we're in Werebear form, and also more damage reduction and damage to poisoned enemies. Next up, we're going into the Constricting Tendrils board, where we've got Territorial. We're going to max out Territorial with as much dex as possible, because it's going to give us a further damage multiplier to our Thunderstruck board, and also grab all of these max life nodes. Then we're moving up to the Thunderstruck board. My Thunderstruck multiplier is at 156%. When you're putting this build together, you want to aim for at least 100% bonus, and then as you min-max, you'll be able to get this up to the 140s, 150s. We're going to be socketing the Outmatch glyph in here. Outmatch gives us a damage multiplier for our physical damage, which once again, Hurricane is physical damage. It is not a storm skill. It does physical damage, just like Tornado. Then we're moving over to the Inner Beast board. We don't have spirit issues, so we're not using Inner Beast. We are going to grab, once again, all of the max life survivability nodes. Then we're also going to grab Dominate, which gives us a damage multiplier when we're overpowering and more overpowered damage. Then we're working up to the Survival Instincts node. This is the, basically only legendary node that we're using. While in werebear form, you deal 1% increased damage up to 50% for every 1% difference in current life percent between you and the enemy. This just means that when enemies get low, we're going to get that 50% damage multiplier against them, which is fantastic. And in this board, we're socketing Exploit for more vulnerable damage and also the guaranteed vulnerable procs. This is going to help for mobbing. Obviously, this doesn't do as much for bossing, but that's why we've got the vulnerable affix on our rings. We don't need more armor while in werebear form, and we are just not really needing this. And then we're going to be working our way over to Bulwark. Bulwark gives us more damage reduction while fortified and more fortified generation. Every swing with Maul is guaranteed fortify proc, so we are getting a lot of fortify. And then we're going over to the Ancestral Guidance board, where we're grabbing more max life. I know it says top spirit there, but once again, this is a 4% max life, more max life. And then we're going to be socketing Undaunted for more damage while fortified and damage reduction the more fortify you have. And while I was recording this Paragon board, I realized that technically Undaunted is slightly worse here than just the werebear glyph. So if you wanted to socket the werebear glyph, which is probably the version that's going to be linked, all you need to do is you lose these 2 points so that you can put the werebear glyph in. Let me just do this real quick. My werebear glyph is not level, so it's only level 1. But basically what you would do is you would go this way to grab all of this willpower. Is that enough? So here's 30 willpower, and then as soon as we get this to rank 15, it would expand and grab resolve, so 10 more willpower here, and then we would get damage while in werebear form and 10% damage reduction while in werebear form. I think this is a little bit better than Undaunted. I just didn't realize it until recording this video. But yeah, this is going to probably be where we socket this, and we just lose one single point on the territorial board. We're going to do a quick little just gameplay demonstration, walkthrough, because this is a bit more of a complicated build. I'm going to throw it on a 90 so that I don't have to pay 100% attention and can kind of walk you through the way to play this build, because it is not your standard type of build. So right when you get in, your whole goal is to get provocation to 16. So ideally, you just don't move from the start of the dungeon, hit Maul. We're going to wait for this to hit 16. While we're waiting, we can cast our Poison Creeper and our Ravens. I usually do that to make sure that I get my, at least 2 stacks. It's okay. Wolves is a targetable, so we need Wolves to, actually hit an enemy. But now we got 16 stacks of Provocation. We're good to go. And then we can recast those. And your whole goal while you're, playing this build is... use your basic attack. It'll keep you alive. It'll give you all that DR. Watch out for ground effects. Ground effects still can kill you. And keep an eye on your hurricanes. Sometimes provocation can disappear off the bar. Right there, it disappeared. But because hurricane was at 17 seconds, I know provocation is 16 seconds. So I knew not to click any buttons because provocation was probably max rank. And that's kind of what I mean. This build can be a little bit tricky because you get a lot of buffs, and the buff that's most important to you can sometimes disappear off your bar. If you've got a bunch of elites, you can just press your ultimate button and you will get a ton of damage. Here, provocation's at 17 seconds there when I set it. So I know, even though I don't see provocation, that we're probably close to maxing it. There's 16. We do 1 basic attack. Here's a lot of enemies here. Cast our companion skills to make sure that our next cast of Hurricane gets the clarity damage buff. We just basic attack enemies. If you need healing, pop a potion. Hurricane is at 16 now, so now I'm kind of hands off. Let's see. Yep, exactly 16. Very good. Basic attack. If we need a potion, we can pop one. There's some elites. They're hurting us. Let's pop our ultimate. Some 36 mils. And we're about to get Hurricane back. Boom, boom, boom. So yeah, we got 100% a Hurricane uptime as long as we're not screwing up the provocation. Obviously, if provocation you screw it up, then it's 32 seconds, and we don't have 32 seconds of uptime. Just make sure that you're doing your basic attack in between. There's more damage. I think we just hit a 72 mil. That's pretty good. This build is pretty chill in that like things have a really hard time killing you. You do absurd damage, but it is very, very buff reliant. You need to be doing your buffs correctly. You need to be doing the rotation for everything to go right. But when you're doing it right, this build is just the strongest possible thing that I've seen. So yeah, guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any more questions about this build, come over to twitch.tv/Moxie. We're hanging out, we're playing Druid, we're theory crafting. And if you get any questions, I am there to answer them. So yeah, I'll catch you on the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.